For most of my life, I've loved superhero stories. I've watched superhero movies, I've collected superhero comic books, but to be honest, I'd never really paid much attention to Ironman until the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies started to come out. And Ironman / Tony Stark very quickly became one of my favorites, largely because he's a flawed hero. He's a hero who, yes, he's got this amazing technical genius, but at least in the beginning, he's kind of a selfish jerk. He's also a terrible gift giver. And so if you put yourself in the shoes of Pepper Potts, who was first his girlfriend and later goes on to become his wife. In Iron Man 2, on his way to go and meet with her, Tony picks up a box of strawberries. Well, it turns out that there's one thing in the world that Pepper Potts is allergic to. You guessed it, strawberries. And it's really not till the end of Iron Man 3, in the kind of a late denouement type scene, that Tony gives her this necklace that she treasures. Now, if you're not paying close attention, you don't realize that this necklace is made up of bits of shrapnel that had been in Tony's heart. Part of what happens to Tony is in the first movie, Tony's convoy is attacked, it explodes, and the shrapnel that finds its way into his chest is constantly at risk of killing him. This is why he's got to put the arc reactor, that glowy thing, in his chest, because the battery or the power from that glowy thing is what in a sense magnetizes and pulls those bits of shrapnel out from killing him. When he has surgery at the end of Iron Man 3 to have those little bits of shrapnel removed, he has it made into a necklace, which Pepper Potts then wears around her neck. This gift has particular meaning for Pepper, because not only was this the means that almost killed Tony, this is the event that changed Tony. This is the event that changed Tony from being that selfish, self-centered jerk into a hero. Not a perfect hero, but a hero nonetheless. And in a lot of ways, I mean, you could look at this and say it's a strange gift, or it's a strange thing to treasure, because this thing that almost killed him, this thing that caused so much pain, so much suffering, so much trauma to the both of them, well, it'd be like taking one of our non-medical masks and hanging that around our neck 5 years from now when this pandemic is all over. Why on earth would you choose to celebrate something like that? But for Pepper and for Tony, it's because they see the deeper result, the deeper meaning of what's going on. Now, in a lot of ways, you could look at this and you can compare this, maybe not to a mask, but to the cross. I mean, for us, the cross is just the symbol that we've seen around. It hangs on walls and on the outsides of buildings. People wear it around their neck, like Pepper's necklace. But to the earliest Christians, it would have had a whole other, at least initial meaning to them. Yes, this is the thing upon which Jesus died. But this was this Roman torture device that was developed as a deterrent. Romans would crucify criminals on the outsides of cities with the charge nailed above their head to try and stop criminals, to try and stop people from making poor choices. If you steal, if you kill, if you do whatever it is that you do, sign above the person's head. This is how you'll end up. And for a number of early Christians, the charge was simply the fact that they were Christians at all. And so you have these crosses, these crucifixions that were, sprung up all across the Roman Empire. And so for those first Christians, it would be, I guess in a sense, kind of reliving the trauma of this difficulty of having lost friends and family and fellow believers to this device of torture. Take it a step further. The early Christians were trying to evangelize others, were trying to convert others. So St. Paul writes about the fact that the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it's the power of God. The folly part of this is that for some of the Jewish people who were kind of witnessing all of this, they're hearing Christians talk about this great Messiah, this incredible teacher, this one who'd come to save them all, who had died by crucifixion, who had died in utter embarrassment, stripped down, tortured, and killed. Doesn't sound much like a Messiah to most of them. To the Romans, Well, the Romans, this meant that this was somebody who was beneath them because Roman citizens don't get crucified. This is why if you read what happened to Paul and what happened to Peter, Peter got crucified upside down. Paul was beheaded because Roman citizens were given a more merciful death. So it was hard for some of the Romans to accept this claim that Jesus was God. It was darn near impossible for some of the Jews to accept this claim that Jesus was God, specifically because he died upon the cross. And yet, much like it is for Pepper, for us as Christians, the cross means so much more. The cross sits before us as this sign that says so many things to us. And I want to key in on 3 of them. Now, the first thing that the cross represents to those of us who are able to look back and see it for what it is it's an exclamation point on a story that God has told all throughout the entirety of biblical history. Because from the time that God kicks Adam and Eve out of the garden in Genesis chapter 3, he makes a promise that someday the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent. He makes these promises to Noah, to Abraham, to Moses, to David, about what he's going to do for the world, how he's going to bring the world into a covenant, how a descendant of David will reign on the throne of Jerusalem, of Israel forever. All of these things come to fruition in the person of Jesus Christ. St. Paul writes that all the promises of God find their yes in him. In other words, all these prophecies, more than 400 of them that you can find in the Old Testament, are like this huge flashing neon sign that point towards this Jesus moment. And so Jesus' death on the cross and his resurrection, well, they're that exclamation point that come at the end of the story that remind us that God's love has no limit. But also that show that God is in fact a just God, that God keeps his word. You eat the fruit, you're going to die. And so Jesus died. You break the covenants, and this is the consequence. So Jesus pays the price for all of these breakings of the covenant, all of these sins that even you and I commit. That God's love can in fact be trusted. But you can take this a step further too. The cross is a sign of God's solidarity with us. Now, I don't think it's hard to imagine that there are people who are watching this who have suffered tremendously. Some of you are still suffering tremendously, not just because of this COVID-19 pandemic that we're living through, but through different family situations, different physical ailments, different emotional, mental sufferings, whatever it might be. We all suffer. And while there are attempts made by many different people, myself included, to try and help us find meaning in suffering, the reality is that there are some sufferings that we may never have a satisfactory answer for in this lifetime. And what does the cross say to us? Well, it says to us that we don't suffer alone. This is why if you look at the crosses that we hang in Catholic churches, the actual technical name for them is crucifix, because there is a crucified image of Jesus hanging on those crosses. And so you can sort of imagine that as you feel like you yourself have been crucified because of some form of suffering you are living through, just remember Jesus is hanging right beside you on the cross. Because he suffered physical suffering in his torture and his crucifixion. Without getting into too much detail, the Romans were exceptionally good at what they did. And there are very few forms of torture and execution that humanity has ever come up with that can match the Romans for the amount of physical pain that crucifixion would have caused Jesus. Jesus knew emotional suffering, the abandonment of his closest friends, the rejection, the betrayal, all that went along with what led up to his crucifixion. Jesus knew heartbreak. Jesus knew loneliness. Jesus knew all of the sufferings we live and experienced them right alongside us. As St. Paul says, alike us in all things except for sin. But there's also good news that comes with the cross. And that's the fact that the cross is a sign of hope. If you walk into a lot of different Protestant churches, you'll notice that their crosses don't have this crucified image of Jesus hanging on them. They're empty crosses. And I remember a Protestant friend of mine asking me one time, why is it that you wear these crosses around your neck that have Jesus still on them? Because he rose from the dead. And part of my explanation was that sense of solidarity, that we know he suffers alongside us. That to get to Easter Sunday, you have to go through Good Friday. But we can't stay so focused on Good Friday that we forget about Easter Sunday. It's not either one, it's both of them. Because the reality is Jesus did rise from the dead. The reality is he is risen from the dead. We have a living hope that death is not the final word in our story, that sin and suffering do not get the last word in our lives, but that thanks to Jesus, God does. When I say I have the hope of heaven, it's something that I am certain of. I am certain that it will get better. I'm certain that things will be better at some point in time. And heaven is far better than you think it's going to be. Heaven is far more extraordinary, far more amazing, far more fulfilling than even our greatest imaginings. And so all of this is a good reminder why we begin and end our prayers with the sign of the cross. It tells you why we make such a point of hanging the cross in such prominent places in our schools and in our churches and often in our homes. Why many of us choose to wear a cross around our necks. Because it's a sign for us of the story God has been telling and the exclamation point with which he brings it all to fulfillment. It's a sign for us of Jesus' solidarity with us in the midst of our sufferings. And ultimately, it is this great, incredible, unbelievable sign of hope.
I have a home, eternal home. But for now, I walk this broken world. You walked it first. You know our pain, but you show hope can rise again up from the grave. Abide with me, abide with me. Don't let me fall, and don't let go. Walk with me and never leave. Ever close, God, abide with me. There in the night, Gethsemane, before the cross, before the nails, overwhelmed. Alone you prayed, you met us in our suffering and bore our shame. Abide with me, abide with me. Don't let me fall, and don't let go. Walk with me, and never leave. Ever close, God, abide with me. Oh, love that will not ever let me go. Love that will not ever let me go. You never let me go. Love that will not ever let me go. And up ahead, eternity, weep no more and sing for joy. Abide with me.